and welcome to Sick Myth. I hope you'll find today's topic to be informative and fascinating. This is part one of a 5-part series. Please enjoy. In the 1800s, the American Industrial Revolution was fueled by coal, and northeastern Pennsylvania had the largest anthracite hard coal deposits in the Western Hemisphere. To extract the coal, tens of thousands of miners, first from the British Isles and then from Eastern and Southern Europe, poured into the region and provided the labor for what became one of the state's largest, most profitable, most dangerous, and most violent industries. In 1869, Pennsylvania became the first state in the nation to pass mine safety legislation, but the state's laws were rarely enforced. In 1868, the state placed law enforcement in the hands of the coal operators, and for more than 60 years, state government aligned with the coal companies, while coal miners lost life and limb at an alarming rate. In the 1870s, more than 5 workers per 1,000 died each year in accidents. Between 1869 and 1900, more than 10,000 mine workers lost their lives, and more than 24,500 were injured in Pennsylvania's anthracite district alone. The Avondale Colliery was a coal mine in Plymouth Township, Luzerne County, in the small town of Avondale. The mine was considered to be one of the best and worst operating in Pennsylvania's Wyoming Valley. The Avondale mine disaster occurred on September 6, 1869, claiming the lives of 108 miners and 2 volunteer rescuers. The Avondale mine disaster stands as one of the most catastrophic mine disasters in American history. The Steuben Shaft at the Avondale complex is situated on the right bank of the Susquehanna River. The 327-foot deep shaft allowed access to the 9-foot red ash vein, which yielded a commercially desirable grade of anthracite. There was only one exit from the mine, the shaft, a practice that had been banned in England but was common for anthracite coal mines in the United States. The Steuben Shaft at Avondale seemed to have been a disaster waiting to happen, but this was state-of-the-art construction for American deep shaft coal mines at the time. It was also, by design, the most economic configuration possible. Lack of a second exit minimized non-productive development time. About 200 workers were employed at the colliery, with the workforce being predominantly Welsh. A 3-month strike had just ended, and the day shift was in the mine on Monday, September 6, 1869. That morning, the coal breaker atop Steuben Shaft at the Avondale Colliery caught fire. The official investigators concluded that the furnace, located well over 100 feet from the shaft, was the source of ignition, with flames traveling up the wood-reinforced shaft and engulfing the entire wooden structure up to the head house, 60 feet above the head frame. The entire day shift inside was trapped underground. The flames grew rapidly, quickly engulfing most of the surrounding wooden structures. As the fire increased, it attracted hundreds of people, especially families of trapped miners. The crowd eventually grew to almost 10,000 bystanders, helpless to do anything but watch as the buildings and shaft burned. Water was soon brought to diminish the fire. As soon as the flames had been extinguished sufficiently for rescuers to approach the shaft, preparations were made to put a lifting device over the opening by which men could descend into the mine. And a consensus was reached to send a dog into the mine first to make sure it was safe. The dog was lowered in and brought out alive, indicating that it would be safe for humans. Before the dog had been lowered into the shaft, a number of men had called into the mine, hoping they would receive an answer from the imprisoned miners. Though some claimed to have heard a response, most had not heard anything. As volunteers were recruited to assist in search and rescue efforts, several brave individuals began to descend into the darkness, removing obstructions with hatchets and hooks as they were being lowered into the mine shaft. As search and rescue efforts continued into the evening, several volunteers reported finding 2 dead mules in a gangway and pounding on a closed door at the bottom of the pit, but receiving no response. Later in the evening, another 2 volunteers, Thomas W. Williams and David Jones, decided to enter the mine to discover the condition of the men within. They descended, and a pick and shovel were sent down after them. After waiting some time without report, another pair of men were sent to look for them. Both Williams and Jones were found lying on the ground, unmoving. Williams was brought up immediately and declared dead from the fumes. Jones was brought up soon after and also declared dead. This demonstrated the rapid accumulation of black damp, carbon dioxide, and low levels of oxygen, incapable of supporting life. The presence of toxic levels of black damp made rescue efforts much more complicated, as nobody could stand the increasingly foul air for long periods of time. The overwhelming presence of lethal levels of black damp suggested little hope for the 108 trapped miners, and rescue attempts yielded to recovery operations. A fan powered by a steam donkey engine arrived on site Tuesday morning. Air was pumped down, with the objective being to establish fresh airflow deeper into the mine. Much to the dismay of the rescuers, the ventilation furnace and an adjacent pile of coal were found blazing, negating efforts to ventilate the deeper mine. Since normal ventilation had been blocked by debris in the shaft and main gangway, black damp and white damp, carbon monoxide from incomplete combustion, continued to be produced at lethal levels by the furnace. By heroic efforts, the fire was extinguished with water piped from the surface. Downcast fan ventilation was continued, and fresh air bases were established. By 3 a.m. Wednesday, workers were able to move down the main gangway to the mule stable, several hundred feet inward. The first 2 victims were discovered, the stable boss and a young mule driver. Their bodies were bloated with blood oozing from their mouths. As recovery efforts continued, rescuers eventually encountered, quote, a view which appalled the stoutest heart among them. Grouped together, in every possible position, laid the dead bodies of 67 men and boys, end quote. Many victims appeared merely to be asleep. Fathers embraced their sons. Men assumed the attitude of prayer. Others leaned against gangway walls. Some men had struggled for a final breath. Their faces were buried in the coal dust of the floor or wrapped with their shirts. Eyeballs were protruded, and blood had foamed from mouths and noses. More victims were discovered in small groups throughout Wednesday and early Thursday morning. Notably, 7 men who sealed themselves into a chamber, attempting to seal a makeshift barrier with their clothing. Considering the size of the community, the losses were catastrophic. 110 deceased miners left behind 72 widows and 158 fatherless children. Not included in these numbers were families of widows and children in the countries of origin of immigrant miners who came to America alone. One local congregation lost all of its male members. The tragedy at Avondale was caused by the practice of using a small fire to circulate air at the bottom of the shaft. Timbers in the shaft caught fire, spreading to the surface and engulfing the breaker, blocking off the only exit for the miners who were trapped underground. As the fire burned up their oxygen supply, carbon monoxide overwhelmed the miners, asphyxiating 108 men and boys, as well as 2 men attempting a rescue. As recovery efforts continued, slowly, bodies were brought to the surface in a seemingly endless stream. Bodies were washed, identified, and returned to families for burial. Over the following days, funerals became an hourly occurrence in Avondale, Plymouth, and other neighboring communities. The disaster led to a change in mining laws, forcing coal operators to ensure mines were properly ventilated and ending the dangerous practice of building fire-prone coal breakers directly atop mine openings. The disaster also led to an influx of mine workers into the Working Men's Benevolent Association, an early union led by John Siney. Following the disaster in 1869, the complex continued to operate into the 1900s, although the Great Depression ultimately doomed the Avondale Colliery. Today, the Plymouth Historical Society has preserved the ruins on the site of the Avondale Colliery and has signs detailing the events of September 6, 1869. Of the 110 men and boys who gave their lives at Avondale, 58 are laid to rest at Washburn Cemetery in West Scranton, with 54 in the part of the cemetery unofficially known as the Avondale section. I do encourage you to learn about the official coroner's inquest into the accident and the verdict of the jury, as well as the victims, widows, and families associated with this local tragedy. Thank you for watching part 1 of this series. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll investigate the twin shaft disaster which occurred in Pittston, Pennsylvania in 1896. Please like and subscribe. Until next time, thank you for watching. Take care.